Thank you for tuning into Gods, Demons, and Magic. This is your host, Sri Satchidananda Das. We're continuing our exploration of the Egyptian mysteries by Iamblichus. And in this ancient text, the Egyptian priest Abaman is answering the questions of the Greek sage Porphyry. Porphyry had asked about the nature of the planets. In many ancient traditions, the planets are considered to be gods, directly gods. They're floating up in the sky. And yet we understand, as we've spoken of in previous podcasts, that the bodies of the gods are considered to be made of ether. And ether being sort of like the winds that blow in outer space and the winds that move the planets themselves, as well as the winds that blow within the heavenly realms. And these winds are considered to be like sort of a light or bright, shining element that has a bluish tint to it. So when the ancient Egyptians or the ancient Greeks looked up into the sky, they would see the sky was light blue and shining in the daytime, and they believed that you're looking upward through our own atmosphere into the realm of the gods, where this bluish and bright, shining element known as ether exists. Then at nighttime, the goddess of night then pulls a veil between our realm, between our sky, and the realm of the gods or outer space, and sort of blocks out the realm of the gods so that you can no longer see it. And then in the morning time, the god of the day then disperses with the coming of the sun, that veil of night, and you can again see the realm of the gods shining in blue. And so the bodies of the gods are considered to be made of this element, the shining, brilliant blue element. And Abaman actually mentioned something interesting, that the bodies of the gods, they're not composed of organs. There's no pumps, and there's no veins and heart or liver, anything like that. There's no mixture of various elements. They're just made of one particular element, which is this ether. And it looks just like a regular form, like you or I. Of course, it may be very brilliant and beautiful, but it's just composed of one particular element all the way through, in and out. And so, they have these ethereal bodies, and yet Porphyry's asking, what about the planets? We can see them up there in the sky. These appear to be physical objects, made of the various elements, and that's, of course, confirmed by modern science, right? It's made of rocks and things like that. So how are the planets gods when they're simply made of earth and different elements like this? I mean, after all, you can see them, right? So again, Abaman reiterates that the bodies of the gods are different than our bodies, that just we may be trapped within our bodies and our consciousness limited by our human form, and we're in a sense imprisoned within it, but the gods are not within their bodies. The gods are a kind of spiritual essence or divine essence which pervades the universe. And when you see the body of a god, they're not within that body. Rather, that body is manifest sort of like from the field of energy that is that god. And, that body is them, but it's simply a manifestation of their energy, which is all pervasive. And as we've mentioned before, the gods can have a certain frequency of nature. You can tune into that frequency by offering prayers and ritual prayers. And in this way, the gods can hear things, and they can extend their consciousness throughout the universe to those things at which they are lords over, or you might say by the divine will or divine plan, they've been granted lordship over a certain aspect of nature, the god of fire or the god of the oceans or something like that. And so that ocean or that fire, it's part of their body. Their consciousness extends to it, just like our consciousness extends throughout our body, from the tips of our toes and our fingers to the top of our head. So similarly, the bodies of the gods, it's sort of like distributed throughout the universe into the various aspects of nature. And so when you see the body of a god, like if it were to appear to you in a room or something like that, shielding your eyes, or you would feel incredible purity, you would feel overwhelmed by their divine consciousness. You'd feel extremely purified. And that they're not limited to that body. Rather, that body is just a manifestation of their power. And Abaman answers that the gods are always facing the divine. They're always in a mood of prayer and reverence and sort of focusing their consciousness on the divine, which is the source of all their powers. And because of that, all the manifestations which pervade the universe and of which those gods are lords of, and which are manifestations of those gods, such as the planets, they're all in harmony with the divine will. So because the gods are religious and the gods are looking upwards towards divinity, so the whole universe is brought into order with the divine will. And we ourselves, by looking upwards towards the gods or directly towards God, are also brought similarly into harmony. And the planets themselves, they move along their own path. Like the gods don't have to sit there and steer the planet or even superintend it. It's all sort of moving in harmony with the divine will, moving in its orbit. And because the God, his consciousness is focused on the divine. So he's so absorbed in sort of transcendental consciousness or in meditation on the divine that the planet automatically moves in harmony with the divine. So it's kind of like God and God's will can work through the planet because the God in charge of the planet is fully in harmony with God's will. And therefore the planet sort of moves according to the will of the divine, and the God doesn't have to sort of watch over and make sure that it does. So you could extend this to other aspects of nature, like if the nature sort of moves harmoniously with the will of God in general, because the gods are focused on the divine, and it just sort of happens in a natural, sort of mystical way. They don't have to sort of get down, like you said, like the Wizard of Oz is pulling levers and things like that. No, they just meditate on the divine, and then everything moves in harmony with the will of God, and everything is sort of orchestrated together in unity and in perfection. And just as our bodies may, they may get in the way of our desires. You may get sick, or there's so many different problems. You'd like to be beautiful, but you're not. But with the gods, that's not the case. Their bodies, as well as the planets, they don't get in the way of them. They don't cause difficulties for them. So it's really not a question of the planets sort of being in disharmony with the will of the gods, or the gods have to somehow, grapple with the planet and keep it in control. It just happens naturally. And Abaman mentions that all things are ultimately manifestations of the One. Sometimes we think, the ancient Egyptians were polytheistic, or they're worshipping many different gods, or the Hindus for that matter. But from their perspective, there are these different gods, but there's also one supreme God, transcendent to matter. And all the various gods are different aspects of his energies. And they're empowered by him to essentially manifest and control the world on his behalf. But ultimately there's only one God, and everything that you see and experience, including the gods, are nothing but his powers and energies. And in different traditions, especially in India, therefore they acknowledge the existence of the gods, but they don't worship the gods, they worship the source of the gods, or the source of the energy, namely the one Supreme Lord. And also it's likely that the Egyptian priest Abaman similarly understood the one transcendent God to be Amun. So within the Egyptian tradition, Amun is a one transcendent person. He's beyond matter. He doesn't exist within the world, and he's above all of the other gods. And similar in the Christian or Muslim or Jewish tradition, that you have God or Jehovah, who exists beyond matter, of which this world is a manifestation of his energies. Or you'll find within the Indian traditions, Vishnu. And so this world is essentially the manifestation, you don't experience anything but God, and yet he manifests himself in many different opulences and powers and forms, and prevalent among those forms are the gods themselves. And just as you might see a stained glass window, in the nighttime when there's no sun shining, it looks very dark and dead, and you don't see anything. But as soon as the sun shines through it, you see all sorts of beautiful shapes and forms. So similarly, the world itself, is considered to be illuminated by the light of God, or the light of the absolute truth, or the one, or the good. That bright light is shining through everything. And because everything is illuminated by it, therefore we're attracted to it, and it's very beautiful, and the world has life. So essentially, whatever opulence, whatever life and beauty, whatever you're attracted to in this world, whatever you marvel at, it's nothing but the power and glory of God shining through matter, just as the sun shines through a stained glass window. And of course, the mystical tradition then is to somehow or other penetrate that stained glass window, to make a hole in the window and to climb through it and to see the sun directly. And as that light of the one supreme God, or that light of transcendence, shines into the world, it brings the world not only to life, but it brings the world into harmony, into oneness and unity. Because the gods are pointed towards that one divine source, then that light of the one transcendental source, that light of God, shines through them. They're sort of like empowered by Him, and that brilliance, that luminosity, that spiritual vibration, it manifests through them throughout the universe, and then everything that they're connected to within the universe is then brought into harmony with the will of God. And therefore Abaman mentions that the world, it moves in a circular pattern around the one. Just like you see, the planets are all orbiting in a circular pattern. So this circular pattern, it really represents the order of God. And the planets are, of course, orbiting around the sun, which is considered a manifestation of Amun, or Amun-Ra. And so really the harmony of all things and the order of all things, it's based upon the universe, in particular the gods, sort of looking towards the one and observing it and sort of absorbing its energy in a prayerful mood. And they're all considered to be in a divine chorus, just as the angels are considered to circle around God and glorify Him. So certainly the gods and everything within the universe, including the planets, are considered to be orbiting around the transcendent platform, or orbiting around the one supreme God, and offering prayers and singing and glorifying. And then we, by their association, also enter into that divine chorus. And Abaman mentions briefly that the physical planets that are there, really the important thing that's manifest is not that physical planet, but sort of the astral energy that's there. In other words, there's certainly a physical aspect to the planets, but there's an astral aspect as well, which is kind of like a concentration of the qualities of that God. So when one looks up in the sky and they see the planet Jupiter, the astrological influence of Jupiter on the Earth is not necessarily caused by that, large gaseous body, but it's actually caused by the astral body of Jupiter, which is a concentration of the various qualities of that particular God. And those qualities are considered to be coming from the one supreme God. Ultimately, they're sort of like a divvied out or parceled portion of the qualities of God, manifested and concentrated in a certain astral form. And then that astral form, it shines down upon our planet or our realm, and we interact with that according to our own nature. And it's very interesting because in Vedic astrology, of which I'm somewhat familiar, in the Surya Siddhanta in ancient texts, it actually mentions not only how to, find the particular planet in the sky using mathematics, but where its astral body is located as well, which is sort of like right next to the planet or nearby it. So it also locates the astral centers up in the sky, and they're not directly on top of the planet. And Porphyry also asks that if the planets are gods and the gods are all good, how is it that the planets have negative influences on the world in terms of astrology? You have bad planets like Saturn and Mars, good planets like Jupiter and Venus, and they do, the planets are causing positive and negative effects on people's life. So how is it that good gods can cause bad things, right? And so, this is a very good question. And so Abaman answers that the gods are good, and the gods are unchanging. It's almost like that astral planet up in the sky. It's shining out with a certain radiance, just like the sun has its radiance, and it's always consistent. It doesn't change its influence, always shining out the same energy. So similarly, say the planet Jupiter, it's always shining out Jupiter energy, just like a star or a sun. And that doesn't change, and it's always there consistently with its qualities. And yet when that light hits us on this planet and enters into, you might say, our astral body, it becomes refracted and shaped into our particular destiny. It's almost like you have these kaleidoscopes, like you take your kaleidoscope, when you're a kid, and it almost looks like a telescope, and then you hold it up to the sun and you look in it, and when the sun's light hits the kaleidoscope, it changes into all different shapes and colors. And as you move the little wheel, all these shapes, they form these beautiful mandalas, right? Rainbow mandalas right there in your hand. And so it's kind of like that, you have the light of the planet, just like the light of the sun, shines down upon you, and it's the same radiance that hits everyone, and yet we're all holding our own kaleidoscope, and that kaleidoscope is our own personal birth chart, And so when that light enters into sort of our conditioning and becomes refracted and bounces around, within our astral body, then that gives us our particular destiny. And so the nature of human beings, according to Abaman, is that we're inharmonious, we're imperfect, we're not in harmony with the divine will. And because we're not in harmony with the divine will, due to our choices that we've made, etc., it's like we become refracted receptacles of that light. And all the light of the planets, as it hits us, it sort of bounces around, becomes misshapen within our own disharmonious nature. And so that is what actually causes the suffering, not the gods themselves. So, for example, you might have the light of Mars. This is the example that Abaman gives. So that's a very impulsive energy, right? And it's shining down onto everyone. But when it enters into your particular astral body, sort of into the scaffolding, the construct of your personality, then it bounces around within that kaleidoscope, and it's manifest within you as a certain tendency. So you'll be impulsive in a certain way. Say, for example, your astrological chart is such that Mars is in your third house, and he's aspected by Jupiter or something like that, then that impulsiveness will manifest in a very positive way. It'll be positive to you and positive to others. Mars in the third house would be, you're very strong and directed towards your goals, and you want to somehow or other, through learning and through experimentation and through being courageous and forceful with your will, you're going to develop yourself into something wonderful, something great. And with the influence of Jupiter, it'll be kind and generous to others and not in a way that's harmful to others. It's like the individual that wins the race or wins the competition, but then gives the trophy over to somebody he feels deserves it more or something like that. So in this way, that impulsiveness, that sort of competitive nature, that intensity that actually becomes manifest in a positive way in one individual, whereas then you can have, Mars manifest in a negative way in someone else's chart. It's the same energy, but it's refracted differently in that individual due to their constitution. And therefore, they may become belligerent or violent or aggressive or even suicidal. That sort of aggression can be turned into a very negative thing. And so it's not due to Mars, it's due to how we receive the energy of Mars, and we all receive it differently. And this is very much in line with, in Vedic astrology, the planets, although they're classified as malefic or benefic, some planets are good, some are bad, they're understood to not really be good or bad. They're just the sort of like the divine qualities of God, ultimately. And, you're getting a certain experience from them. And the benefic ones will give you that experience in a way which is very gentle and kind. That's like Jupiter and Venus and Mercury, if nicely positioned, and a moon, which is waxing, and if it's nicely positioned. All of these planets will give you a certain experience in a way that you enjoy it. And then the malefic planets will give you an experience in a way that you have to struggle for it, or you have to work very hard for it. There's suffering involved, but they can also give you the same experience. So say, for example, you have, a benefic planet like Jupiter, Venus, and it's in a very bad place, like say Jupiter in the 6th house or Venus in the 6th house. That can cause someone to become obese, and have various difficulties, diabetes and things like that. Whereas, Venus in the 6th house, that's Jupiter. Venus in the 6th house can cause someone to become an alcoholic, depending on other factors, right? But because they're benefics, that experience will be a joyful experience. Who doesn't like to eat, right? Who does, people like to drink alcohol because it's pleasurable. So you're destroying yourself and you're harming yourself, but it's a pleasurable experience. Whereas you can have malefic planets like Mars or Saturn, they can be very nicely positioned in your chart. Saturn in the 10th house and Libra exalted. It's you have to work very, very hard, and he makes you fight and struggle and suffer. But in the end, you end up being very, very successful. like you attain things that no one else could even imagine. So, but it was a very hard road. So it doesn't so much depend upon the planet as much as how it's positioned in your particular chart. The only difference being that some planets give things in a way which is pleasurable, whether it be good or bad, and other planets give things in a way which indicates hard work and suffering, whether the results be good or bad. Abaman offers us a couple analogies to understand this. He says that just like some people they can't handle the sun. They may have a disease or something like that, which makes it very hard for them to be in the sun, but you can't blame the sun for that. Or we might say in a more modern way, you can't blame the sun for your sunburn, right? It's like you have your own skin condition, and if you decide to go out and sleep in the sun or something like that, you're going to get burnt. So it's your own constitution which is causing the burn, not the sun. The sun is there steady and untouched, uninvolved, just sort of like emanating its rays in which we all share, and yet we all have a different experience of those rays according to our constitution or our nature. And Abaman wants us to understand that the suffering and misery we undergo, it's due to our own disharmony with the divine will. He says that just like you have people dancing together, like say for example in a waltz, you have 20 different couples and they're all moving together in step with each other in a big circle, and they're spinning around and everyone's in harmony with each other. It looks very beautiful. And yet you might have one couple sort of move into the middle of it all and they're out of harmony. Not only are they out of harmony with the musicians, but they're out of harmony or out of rhythm with the musicians. They're out of harmony with all the dancers. And very soon they're going to be bumping into everyone. They're going to get their feet stepped on, going to get an elbow in the back or something like that. So that's not due to the orchestra and it's not due to the other dancers. It's due to your own lack of harmony. So similarly, we all have our particular conditioning, which is born, you might say, out of our karma or destiny, which is out of harmony with the divine will due to our own previous choices. And because we've made choices that are against the divine will, or you might say against the laws of God, therefore we're out of harmony with the universe in essence, and then we experience the astral rays coming from the planets. They bounce around inside of us. They interact with our own karmic destiny embedded within our astral body, and we experience suffering. So it's really our own disharmony with the universe that manifests as suffering in life. So thank you very much for listening. If you found value in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope you'll join us next time on Gods, Demons, and Magic.